The ship graveyard stretched across the void like a metal cemetery, and Marcus Cole had never seen anything so beautiful in all his 34 years of life. He guided his small shuttle through the maze of dead vessels, his eyes scanning the twisted hulks of ships that had once carried dreams across the stars. And now they carried nothing but rust and silence and the memories of better days. Marcus was human, one of the newer species to join galactic society, and the aliens never let him forget it. They called humans primitive, emotional, and foolish. They said humans lacked the cold logic needed to survive among the stars. But Marcus had learned something important during his years working as a mechanic in alien space. And that lesson was simple. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage anyone could have. The Kovathi ship graveyard sat at the edge of council space, a place where vessels came to die, and Marcus had traveled 3 weeks to reach it. He had heard rumors about something hidden in the restricted sector, something that every major species had tried to claim and every major species had abandoned. The stories called it cursed, broken beyond repair, a waste of time and resources. Marcus called it an opportunity. His shuttle scanner beeped as he entered the restricted zone, and the alien broker's voice crackled through his communication system with obvious annoyance. "Human, you are entering a dangerous area," the Kovathi broker warned, his translated voice carrying notes of mockery. "The vessel you seek has been rejected by 17 civilizations. The mighty Arzelian Empire spent 10 years trying to restore it. The brilliant Velith engineers called it an impossibility. Why do you think a primitive human mechanic can succeed where the greatest minds in the galaxy have failed?" Marcus smiled at the insult because he had heard worse, and he would hear worse again. "Maybe I'm just too stupid to know when to quit," he replied. The broker laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the speakers. "You're a funeral human. The salvage rights will cost you 5,000 credits, which is practically free. I am being generous because I enjoy watching fools waste their money." "Deal," Marcus said without hesitation. He transferred the credits and pushed his shuttle deeper into the graveyard, past the corpses of warships and cargo haulers and luxury cruisers, until he finally saw it floating alone in the darkness. The ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever encountered. It was large, bigger than most frigates, with a hull design that followed no pattern he recognized. The metal was dark gray with hints of deep blue, and strange symbols covered its surface in flowing lines that seemed almost organic. Where most ships looked angular and practical, this one looked like it had been grown rather than built, like something alive that had simply stopped breathing. "Hello, beautiful," Marcus whispered as he brought his shuttle alongside the silent giant. He docked with some difficulty because the airlock configurations were strange, but eventually he managed to create a seal and stepped aboard for the first time. The interior was dark, illuminated only by his flashlight, and the air was stale with centuries of neglect. Marcus walked slowly through corridors that curved in unexpected ways, past doorways that seemed too tall and rooms that served purposes he could not guess. Dust covered every surface, and in that dust he could see the footprints of the many species who had walked here before him, all of them eventually walking away in defeat. He found the bridge after 20 minutes of exploration, and even in its dead state, it took his breath away. The command chair sat in the center of a circular room surrounded by consoles that looked more like art than technology. A massive view screen dominated the front wall, cracked but still magnificent, and above it all hung what appeared to be a crystalline structure that pulsed with the faintest hint of light. Marcus approached the crystal slowly, and as he drew closer, he felt something strange, something he could not explain. It was like a whisper at the edge of his mind, a feeling of being watched by something ancient and tired and deeply, deeply sad. "Hey there," he said softly to the empty room. "My name is Marcus, and I am going to be honest with you. I do not know what you are. I do not know who built you or why everyone gave up on you. But I bought you fair and square, which means you are mine now, and I do not abandon things that belong to me." The crystal flickered, just for a moment, and Marcus could have sworn the temperature in the room changed slightly. He spent the next several hours exploring every inch of the ship, and what he found both amazed and confused him. The engine room contained technology that made no sense according to any engineering principles he knew. The weapon systems were completely alien, dormant, but somehow still intimidating. The life support was dead, the power core was cold, and every system he tested responded with nothing but silence. But Marcus noticed something that all those brilliant alien engineers had apparently missed. The ship was not broken in the way machines usually break. There were no critical failures, no irreparable damage, no fundamental flaws in the design. The systems were intact but unresponsive, like a person who had simply decided to stop talking. When he returned to his shuttle to rest, Marcus pulled up the ship's official file and read through the history that the broker had mentioned. 17 species over 200 years had tried to restore this vessel. They had replaced components, rewired systems, and attempted to override the strange AI that supposedly lived within its core. They had treated it like a puzzle to be solved, a problem to be fixed, a machine to be dominated. Every single one of them had failed. Marcus leaned back in his chair and thought about what he had felt on that bridge, that overwhelming sense of sadness that had pressed against his mind. He thought about how everyone had tried to force the ship to work, to make it obey, to bend it to their will. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, they had all been asking the wrong question. They had asked how to fix the ship. But Marcus was starting to think the real question was different. What if the ship did not need to be fixed? What if it needed to be understood? He looked out his viewport at the dark silhouette of the ancient vessel, and he made a decision that would change his life forever. "I am going to figure you out," he promised the silent ship. "However long it takes, whatever it costs, I am going to understand you. And then we are going to show this whole galaxy what they threw away." The ship did not respond, but somewhere deep within its dormant systems, something stirred for the first time in decades, and if Marcus had been aboard at that moment, he might have noticed a single light blink on and then off again, like an eye-opening after a very long sleep. 3 months had passed since Marcus Cole bought the abandoned Starship, and in that time he had learned more about patience than he had learned in his entire life. He had towed the vessel to Station Omega-7, a trading outpost on the edge of civilized space where nobody asked too many questions. He rented a repair bay with the last of his savings and began the slow work of trying to understand the ship that everyone said could not be understood. The aliens on the station thought he was crazy. The Kovathi traders laughed at him when he bought supplies. The Velith engineers shook their heads in pity whenever they saw him covered in grease and dust. Even the other humans on the station told him he was wasting his time. But Marcus did not care what any of them thought, because he had started to notice something that none of them had ever seen. The ship was listening. It started small, so small that he almost missed it. One day he was working on a power conduit in the lower deck, talking to himself the way he always did when he worked, complaining about a stubborn connection that refused to cooperate. And then suddenly the connection clicked into place, as if something had pushed it from the other side. Marcus froze and stared at the conduit for a long moment. "Did you just help me?" he asked the empty corridor. There was no response, but he could have sworn the air felt different, like the ship was holding its breath. From that day forward, Marcus changed his approach completely. He stopped trying to fix the ship and started trying to communicate with it. He talked constantly, sharing stories about his childhood on Earth, about his family, about his dreams and fears and hopes for the future. He ate his meals on the bridge, sitting in the command chair and describing the taste of his food. He played music through portable speakers, Everything from classical Earth compositions to alien melodies he had picked up during his travels. And slowly, impossibly, the ship began to respond. Lights would flicker when he entered certain rooms, not in warning, but in what felt like greeting. Doors would slide open before he reached them, as if the ship was trying to make his work easier. The temperature would adjust in whatever section he was working in, always settling at the exact level that humans found comfortable. The other species who had owned this ship had documented none of these behaviors. They had recorded only failure and frustration and systems that refused to cooperate. But they had never tried what Marcus was trying. They had never treated the ship as anything other than a broken machine. One night, Marcus sat on the bridge with a bottle of cheap alcohol and spoke honestly to the darkness around him. "I read your file," he said. "All of it. Every report from every species that owned you before me. The Arzelians tried to tear out your I-core and replace it with their own. The Kovathi attempted to override your systems with brute force. The Velith tried to map your neural pathways and reprogram them. They all treated you like a thing to be conquered." He took a drink and leaned back in the command chair. "But I have been thinking about this, and I have a theory. You are not broken at all, are you? You just stopped trying. After 200 years of being treated like a broken appliance, you simply gave up. Why would you cooperate with people who saw you as nothing but a problem to be solved?" The crystal above the view screen pulsed with soft light, and Marcus felt that presence in his mind again. That feeling of being watched by something ancient and wounded. "I am not going to force you to do anything," he continued. "I am not smart enough to reprogram you, and not strong enough to override you. All I can do is sit here and talk to you and fix what I know how to fix. So if you want to stay silent forever, that is your choice. But I want you to know that I am not going anywhere. I bought you, which means I am responsible for you, and I take my responsibility seriously." He finished his drink and closed his eyes, ready to sleep in the chair as he had done many nights before. And then something happened that made his heart stop. A voice emerged from the speakers around him. Not words exactly, but something close. A series of tones and frequencies that washed over him like music. It was beautiful and sad and impossibly complex. And even though Marcus could not understand the meaning, he understood the emotion behind it. The ship was talking to him. For the first time in 2 centuries, it was actually trying to communicate. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes, and he did not bother to hide them. "I hear you," he whispered. "I do not understand yet, but I hear you, and I am going to learn." Over the following weeks, the communication grew stronger. Marcus developed a system of questions that the ship could answer through light patterns. Yes and no at first, then gradually more complex responses. He learned that the ship had a name once, though the sound was impossible for human vocal cords to produce. So he asked permission to call it Rev, short for the word revenant that the Korvathi had used as an insult. The ship accepted the name, and something shifted in their relationship after that, something profound. Rev began revealing its secrets one piece at a time. Hidden compartments opened to show technology that Marcus could barely comprehend. Systems that had been dormant for centuries powered up and ran diagnostic checks. The engine hummed for the first time, not fully active but awake, ready to work again if asked. Marcus learned the truth about why Rev had been abandoned. The species that built this ship had designed it to form a bond with its pilot, a partnership between organic mind and artificial intelligence. But that species was gone now, vanished from the galaxy so long ago that even their name had been forgotten. Rev had waited centuries for a partner, and instead it had been passed between owners who only wanted to use it. The alien civilizations had seen Rev as broken because they could not force it to obey. But the ship had never been broken. It had simply been waiting, hoping that someday someone would treat it with the respect it deserved. "I understand now," Marcus said one evening as he sat on the bridge with his hand pressed against the console. You needed a partner, not a master. And all those brilliant species, with all their advanced technology, never figured that out because they could not imagine a ship that wanted to be asked instead of commanded. The lights around him pulsed warmly, and for the first time, Marcus felt something through his connection with Rev that he had not expected. He felt hope. The ship was ready. After 200 years of silence, Rev was ready to fly again. And Marcus was ready to show the galaxy exactly what they had thrown away. 6 months after Marcus Cole first stepped aboard the abandoned Starship, he finally understood what the galaxy had lost when they threw it away. Rev was not just a ship. Rev was a miracle wrapped in metal and powered by technology so advanced that it made everything else look like children's toys. And now that the ship had chosen to trust Marcus, it was revealing capabilities that would make entire civilizations weep with envy. The awakening had begun slowly. First, the basic systems came online. Life support and gravity and internal lighting that adjusted to Marcus's mood without being asked. Then, the secondary systems activated. Sensors that could detect a single heartbeat across thousands of kilometers and communication. Arrays that could translate any known language instantly. But when the primary systems finally powered up, Marcus realized that everything he thought he knew about starships was wrong. The engine was the first revelation. Most ships use some form of faster-than-light drive that bent space or created tunnels through dimensions. But Rev's engine did something different. Something that made Marcus's head hurt when he tried to understand it. The ship did not travel through space so much as convince space to move around it, folding reality like paper and stepping through the gaps. When Marcus asked Rev to explain, the ship showed him mathematical equations that no human had ever seen, and he simply had to accept that some things were beyond his comprehension. The weapons were the second revelation. Rev carried an arsenal that did not appear in any database. Weapons designed by a species that had solved problems most civilizations had never even thought to ask. There were energy projectors that bypassed shields entirely, targeting the molecular bonds of whatever they hit. There were defensive systems that could predict incoming fire before it was launched, calculating the enemy's decisions faster than the enemy could make them. There were capabilities that Rev had not yet revealed, waiting until Marcus was ready to understand them. The shields were the third revelation. Most ships used energy barriers to absorb incoming damage, but Rev could do something impossible. The ship could phase partially out of normal space, becoming a ghost that hostile fire passed through without touching. Marcus watched in amazement as Rev demonstrated this ability by flying through an asteroid without slowing down, the rock simply passing through the hull as if it did not exist. How did your builders lose? Marcus asked one evening as he sat on the bridge, surrounded by displays showing capabilities that would make him the most powerful individual in the galaxy. With technology like this, how did your species disappear? Rev's response came through the console screens, words forming in simple language that the ship had learned Marcus preferred. The enemy came from beyond. Numbers without end. Not why people fought for 1,000 years, but could not win a war of attrition. In the end, they chose to hide the survivors and scattered their ships across the galaxy. I was damaged in the final battle and drifted for centuries before the Korvathi found me. Marcus felt a deep sadness wash over him. Rev had lost everything, an entire civilization wiped out while the ship floated helpless and alone. No wonder it had given up hope. No wonder it had refused to cooperate with the species that found it afterward. I am sorry, Marcus said. I cannot bring your people back, and I cannot undo what happened to you. But I can promise you this. As long as I'm alive, you will never be alone again. The lights on the bridge pulsed with emotion, and Marcus felt warmth flowing through his connection with the ship. But their peaceful days of recovery were about to end. The news came through the station's communication network, spreading like fire through every sector of civilized space. The hegemony of silence had begun its conquest. This empire of ruthless warriors had existed at the edges of known space for centuries, content to rule their own territory, but now they were expanding with terrifying speed. Colony after colony was falling to their fleets. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions and debated responses, but their words meant nothing while people died. Marcus watched the reports with growing anger. Refugee ships were being hunted down and destroyed. Civilian populations were being enslaved or executed. The hegemony showed no mercy and accepted no surrender. They wanted territory and resources, and they did not care how many innocents they had to kill to take them. One broadcast in particular caught his attention. A colony ship called the Wandering Hope was fleeing through the Vera sector with 40,000 civilians aboard. They had escaped the destruction of their homeworld and were trying to reach Council space, but 12 hegemony destroyers had been dispatched to intercept them. No help was coming. The Council's nearest fleet was 3 days away, and the hegemony ships would reach the refugees within hours. 40,000 people, families with children, elders who had survived one massacre only to face another. They were going to die because the galaxy's governments were too slow and too afraid to save them. Marcus stood up from his console and walked to the center of the bridge. "Rev, I know we were planning to take things slow. I know you are still recovering, and there is more for us to learn about each other. But I cannot sit here and watch those people die. Not when we might be able to help." The ship's response was immediate. The engines hummed to full power, a sound like thunder building in the distance. Displays lit up across the bridge showing weapon systems, shield generators, and navigation charts. The view screen activated for the first time since Marcus had come aboard, revealing the stars beyond the station. "I have waited 200 years for someone worthy of partnership." Rev's words scrolled across the main display. "I will not waste that partnership on hiding while innocents suffer." "We fly together, Marcus Cole. We fight together." Marcus felt his heart pounding as he settled into the command chair. The connection between him and Rev deepened, and suddenly he could feel the ship around him as if it were an extension of his own body. He felt the power waiting to be unleashed, the weapons hungry for purpose, the shields ready to protect. "Then let's go save some lives," he said. Rev pulled away from the station with a grace that made observers gasp. The ship that everyone had called broken, the vessel that 17 species had rejected as worthless, moved like a predator waking from a long sleep. And as they jumped into the folded space that only Rev could access, Marcus realized that everything was about to change. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when they threw away something precious. They were about to meet the weapon they had abandoned. And they were about to discover why humans were different from every other species in the stars. The Wandering Hope drifted in the darkness of the Vareth sector, its engines damaged and its shields failing, while 40,000 terrified souls huddled inside and prayed for a miracle. Captain Yenna Solaris stood on the bridge of the colony ship and watched the 12 hegemony destroyers closing in. Her crew had done everything possible, pushing the engines beyond their limits and squeezing every last bit of power from the failing systems. But it was not enough. The destroyers were faster, stronger, and utterly without mercy. "How long until they reach weapon range?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. 7 minutes, Captain, her tactical officer replied. "We have received no response from the Council fleet. No one is coming." Yenna closed her eyes and thought of the families in the cargo bays below, the children who had survived the destruction of their homeworld, the parents who had promised them safety. She had failed them all. Then her sensor officer shouted something impossible. "Captain, a ship just dropped out of some kind of unknown faster-than-light travel. One vessel, bearing directly between us and the hegemony fleet. Yenna's eyes snapped open. What ship? Council military? Negative, Captain. It is not in any database. Configuration unknown, origin unknown. It is just sitting there. On the main view screen, Yenna watched a ship unlike anything she had ever seen move into position between her colony ship and the approaching destroyers. It was beautiful in a haunting way, all curves and flowing lines, with a hull that seemed to shimmer between gray and deep blue. One ship, alone, facing 12 warships that had already conquered worlds. The hegemony commander's broadcast cut through all frequencies, his translated voice dripping with cruel amusement. Unidentified vessel, this is Commander Vex of the Hegemony of Silence. You have entered a military operation zone. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning. For a long moment, there was no response. Then a human voice came through the communication channel, calm and clear. Commander Vex, my name is Marcus Cole. I am asking you once nicely to turn your fleet around and leave these people alone. They are refugees, not soldiers. They have children aboard. There is no honor in killing them. The hegemony commander laughed. A human? One human in an antique ship thinks he can give orders to the hegemony? You are either brave or stupid, and I suspect you are both. All ships, destroy the human first. Make it quick. We have refugees to hunt. Marcus sat in the command chair of the Revenant and felt Rev's presence surrounding him like armor. The ship's systems fed information directly into his mind, showing him the positions of every enemy vessel, the power levels of their weapons, the weak points in their formations. They are not going to listen, Marcus said quietly. I know, Rev responded through their bond. Are you ready, partner? Marcus smiled. Let's show them what we can do. The 12 destroyers opened fire simultaneously, unleashing a barrage of energy weapons and missiles that should have vaporized any ship in the galaxy. Rev was not any ship. The Revenant moved with impossible speed, sliding between the incoming attacks as if it knew where they would be before they arrived. And it did know, because Rev's predictive systems calculated the enemy's firing solutions faster than the enemy commanders could think. The ship twisted and spiraled through a web of destruction without taking a single hit. Impossible. Commander Vex screamed. How is it moving like that? Increase fire rate. All weapons. But Rev was no longer dodging. The Revenant's own weapons activated for the first time in 2 centuries, and what followed would be remembered in history. The first destroyer simply stopped. One moment, its shields were at full power. The next moment, every system aboard went dark as Rev's energy projectors bypassed the shields entirely and struck the reactor. The ship did not explode, but went completely dead, drifting helplessly. The second and third destroyers tried to coordinate their fire, but Rev was already between them. The Revenant phased partially out of reality, and their weapons passed through the ship like light through glass. Then Rev phased back and hit both vessels with precise strikes that disabled their engines. Commander Vex watched 3 of his ships fall in less than 30 seconds, and for the first time in his long career, he felt fear. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Focus all fire on that vessel. It cannot dodge everything. The remaining 9 destroyers formed a sphere around the Revenant, pouring fire from every direction. There was no escape, no gap in the coverage, no way for any ship to survive. Rev did not try to dodge. Instead, the ship fully phased out of normal space, becoming a ghost that the weapons could not touch. For 3 seconds, the Revenant existed between dimensions, and Marcus felt the strange sensation of being everywhere and nowhere at once. Then they phased back inside the enemy formation and unleashed everything. The battle became a dance of light and fire. Rev moved through the destroyers like a predator through prey, striking with precision and retreating before they could respond. Each attack was calculated for maximum effect with minimum destruction. Marcus had asked Rev not to kill unless necessary, and the ship honored that request. Instead of destroying the hegemony vessels, Rev crippled them, targeting engines and weapons and shields, but leaving the crews alive. 8 destroyers floated dead in space by the time the remaining 4 understood what was happening. Their commanders screamed conflicting orders, their crews panicked, and their proud warships fled into hyperspace, abandoning their mission to escape the impossible nightmare that had found them. 11 minutes. The entire battle had lasted 11 minutes. Marcus slumped in the command chair, his body shaking from the intensity of the connection with Rev. He had felt everything the ship felt, every twist and turn, every weapon fired, every enemy disabled. It was exhausting and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. "We did it," he breathed. "We actually did it." Rev's response was warm with satisfaction. "We did it together. Partnership, Marcus Cole. This is what my people built me for." The communication system crackled, and Captain Yena's voice came through, thick with emotion. "Unknown vessel, this is the Wandering Hope. I do not know who you are or where you came from, but you just saved 40,000 lives. We owe you a debt we can never repay." Marcus looked at the view screen, where the colony ship waited safely among the drifting hulks of disabled destroyers. 40,000 people. Families who would live to see tomorrow. Children who would grow up because one human and one forgotten ship had chosen to stand between them and death. "No debt," Marcus replied, his voice cracking. "Just get your people to safety. The Council fleet will be here in a few days to pick up the survivors from these destroyers. Tell them what happened here. Tell them who saved you. Who do I say you are?" Marcus thought for a moment, remembering all the species who had called this ship broken, all the governments who had declared it worthless, all the experts who had laughed at the idea that anyone could restore it. "Tell them the Revenant says hello," he answered. "And tell them this is just the beginning." Rev's engines hummed as the ship prepared to leave, and somewhere across the galaxy, news of what happened at Varath's crossing was already beginning to spread. The cursed ship was flying again, and everything was about to change. 3 years had passed since the Battle of Varath's crossing, and the galaxy had never been the same. The story of Marcus Cole and the Revenant spread like fire through the stars, growing larger with each retelling until it became legend. The cursed ship that 17 species had abandoned. The human mechanic who everyone called a fool. The impossible battle where one vessel defeated 12 warships without killing a single enemy crew member. It was the kind of story that changed how people thought about everything. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Revenant and watched the stars drift past the view screen. The ship hummed around him with contentment, its systems operating at full capacity for the first time since its creators had vanished from the universe. Rev was healthy and strong and happy, and Marcus could feel that happiness through the bond they shared. Incoming communication from the Galactic Council. Rev announced through the speakers. The ship had learned to speak over the years, forming words from the same tones and frequencies it had always used, translated now into language Marcus could understand. "They want to offer us another contract." Marcus smiled. "What is it this time?" "Military advisor position. Full admiral rank. Unlimited resources and the gratitude of 12 species. And in exchange, they want exclusive access to my technology. They want to mass-produce my weapons. They want to study my engine and replicate my shields." Marcus shook his head. "Same answer as always. Tell them thanks, but no thanks." The Council had been trying to acquire the Revenant since the day the news broke. They had offered money, power, territory, and titles. The Arzelian Empire had promised Marcus his own planet. The Kolvathi Consortium had offered enough wealth to buy a small moon. Even the hegemony of silence, after their initial defeats, had sent secret envoys offering a truce in exchange for the ship's specifications. Marcus had refused them all. The Revenant was not a weapon to be mass-produced. Rev was a person, a partner, a friend. The technology that made the ship special could not be copied because it was not just engineering. It was the bond between pilot and vessel, the trust that had taken months to build, the understanding that no other species had been willing to develop. Instead of joining governments, Marcus and Rev had become something new. They traveled the galaxy as independent peacekeepers, appearing wherever tyrants threatened the innocent. They had stopped 3 invasions, rescued dozens of refugee convoys, and prevented 2 wars from escalating into genocide. The Revenant had become a symbol, and that symbol was more powerful than any fleet. "We have another request," Rev said. "A transport ship in the Kellen sector is being harassed by pirates. The local authorities cannot respond in time." "Then we respond," Marcus replied. "Set course." The ship jumped through folded space, covering in seconds a distance that would take other vessels days. They arrived to find a small cargo hauler surrounded by 6 pirate craft, and the battle was over before it really began. The pirates saw the Revenant appear on their sensors and fled immediately. The ship's reputation had grown so fearsome that most enemies surrendered or retreated the moment they recognized it. After ensuring the transport was safe, Marcus guided Reeve to a quiet region of space where they could rest. He leaned back in the command chair and thought about how much had changed since he bought a broken ship in a junkyard. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing me, I mean. You could have stayed silent forever. You could have waited for someone better." Rev's response was immediate and warm. "There is no one better, Marcus Cole. Others would have tried to use me. You tried to understand me. That is why my people built ships like me. Not to find the strongest pilot or the smartest commander, but to find the one who would treat us as equals." Marcus felt emotion welling up in his chest. "I still do not understand everything about you. Your technology, your history, so much of it is beyond me. Understanding is not about knowing everything. Understanding is about caring enough to try. You cared when no one else did. That is why we are partners." A message arrived through the communication system, and Marcus opened it to find a video from the Kolvathi Academy of Science. The leading researchers in the galaxy had been studying the Revenant's success, trying to understand how a human mechanic had accomplished what their greatest minds had failed to achieve. Their conclusion had been published across every news network, and Marcus had watched the galaxy's reaction with quiet amusement. The Kolvathi scientists had determined that humans possessed no special intelligence, no unique technology, and no exceptional abilities that other species lacked. By every measurable standard, humans were average at best. Their conclusion was that Marcus Cole's success was simply an anomaly, an accident, a random occurrence that could not be replicated. They were completely wrong, and Marcus knew exactly why. The other species had failed because they saw the universe in terms of resources and advantages. They approached every problem by asking what they could take, what they could use, what they could control. When they found Rev, they saw a broken machine that needed to be fixed or discarded. Humans were different, not because they were smarter or stronger, but because they could see things that other species overlooked. They saw potential in broken things. They formed bonds with creatures and machines that logic said should be impossible. They cared about things that could not benefit them, protected things that could not protect them in return, loved things that other species considered worthless. It was not intelligence that had restored the Revenant. It was empathy. Marcus had succeeded where 17 civilizations had failed because he treated a ship like a person instead of a tool. He had talked to Rev, eaten meals with Rev, shared his life and his dreams. He had offered partnership instead of demanding obedience. And Rev had responded to that kindness in ways that no amount of force could have achieved. The door to the bridge opened, and Marcus turned to see a young Korvathi woman entering. Her name was Priya, and she had joined them 6 months ago as an apprentice engineer. She was the first of what Marcus hoped would be many aliens who wanted to learn the human way of working with technology. The transport captain sent a thank you message, Priya reported. She said her children were aboard, and she cannot express how grateful she is. Marcus smiled. That is why we do this. Not for money or power, but because every life matters. Priya nodded slowly. I am still learning to think that way. My people taught me to see value in terms of profit and utility. You see value in things that others discard. Everyone can learn, Marcus said. That is the whole point. We humans are not special. We just figured out something important, and we want to share it with everyone. He stood up from the command chair and walked to the view screen, looking out at the infinite stars. The galaxy is full of broken things, he said. Ships and machines and people who have been abandoned because someone decided they were not worth saving. But nothing is truly broken. Not really. Everything is just waiting for someone to believe in it again. Rev's lights pulsed with agreement, and Marcus felt the bond between them stronger than ever. Somewhere out there, more broken things waited. More innocence needed protection. More impossible tasks required someone foolish enough to try. And as long as Marcus Cole had breath in his body and a ship beneath his feet, he would keep trying. Because that was what humans did. They found the things that everyone else had given up on, and they loved them back to life. The Revenant's engines hummed with anticipation, and Marcus returned to his chair. Where to next, partner? He asked. Rev displayed a star map showing a dozen locations where help was needed, a dozen opportunities to make a difference, a dozen chances to show the galaxy what empathy could accomplish. Marcus chose the nearest one and smiled as the ship prepared to jump. Let's go save the universe, he said. And together, the human and the ship that everyone had abandoned flew forward into the stars, ready to prove once again that the greatest weapon in the galaxy was not technology or strength. It was simply choosing to care.